The candles were lit at 7. Simone had lit them herself, going around the long dining table with a slim silver lighter, touching the wick of each candle in the tall crystal holders Gregory had bought in Providence the summer they were married. 12 place settings. Cream linen, folded napkins, the good silverware from the wedding. She had spent the afternoon on the arrangement. She had chosen white roses and pale green eucalyptus because Camille had once said, in French, that red flowers looked cheap. She had understood that comment the day it was made, 4 years ago, at a Thanksgiving dinner. She had not shown it. The guests arrived between 7 and 7:15. Gregory greeted them at the door in his blue jacket, laughing at things that were not funny, kissing cheeks. Camille arrived last, in a cream silk blouse and dark trousers, with her small brown handbag over one shoulder. She embraced Gregory and then turned to Simone with the same neat smile she had used for 8 years. "You look tired," Camille said in English. "Long day at work?" "Not really," Simone said. "Just wanted to make sure everything was ready." "You didn't have to do it all yourself," Camille said. "You should have called a caterer." "I like doing it," Simone said. Camille tilted her head. Then she said something to Gregory in French as she walked past him toward the living room. She said, in a low, quick tone, that if Simone had used a caterer, at least the plates would not look like a country wedding. Gregory laughed under his breath. He said, in French, that she had done her best. Simone finished pouring the wine into the decanter. Her hand was steady. The other guests included 2 members of the Whitaker Hotel's board, a couple from Gregory's tennis club, a young banker from Manhattan named Peter, a French couple from Marblehead named the Delacroix, and a hospitality consultant Gregory introduced as an old family friend. Simone had not met the consultant before. Her name was Corinne Fontaine. Corinne was tall. She had straight brown hair to her shoulders and wore a green silk dress that was, Simone thought, cut for a room she knew how to walk into. She shook Simone's hand and said in careful English how lovely it was to meet her at last. "At last?" Simone said. "Gregory has told me so much about the 2 of you," Corinne said. She smiled. It was a good smile. Simone smiled back. They sat down at 8. Simone had placed Gregory at the head of the table and herself at the foot, as they always did. She had placed Camille to Gregory's right. She had placed Corinne halfway down the table, on Gregory's side, 3 seats away from him. The French couple were on Simone's side, closer to her end. She had done all of this on purpose. The conversation began in English. Gregory talked about the board's plans for a new property in Charleston. The banker asked about occupancy rates in the Boston market. Camille told a story about a hotel in Nice that had lost her luggage. Then, somewhere between the appetizer and the entree, Camille turned to Gregory and said something in French about the salad. "The dressing is too heavy," she said. "She never learns." Gregory smiled and said, in French, that he had told her a dozen times to lighten it. Simone reached for her water glass. At the other end of the table, Madame Delacroix, who had been asking Simone about the eucalyptus, glanced quickly at Gregory and then back at Simone. Her husband looked at his plate. They had heard. They were both French speakers. They knew. Simone smiled at Madame Delacroix. "The greenery is from a little florist on Newbury Street," she said. "I go there whenever I have people over." "It is very pretty," Madame Delacroix said. Her English was careful. Her eyes were kind. The entree came out. Gregory carved the roast. Corinne complimented the sauce. Camille said something to Gregory in French about how it was good that Corinne had helped Simone with the menu because otherwise it would have been the usual disaster. Corinne laughed. She laughed in French. She said, in French, that the sauce was actually Gregory's mother's recipe and she had sent it to Simone last week. Simone had not received any such recipe. She had made the sauce from a cookbook her grandmother Odette had left her, a stained hardcover from 1974 with handwritten notes in the margins. She smiled and passed the potatoes to Peter the banker on her left. The board members asked Gregory about the fourth quarter numbers. Gregory turned the question aside with a joke. Then, in French, he told Camille and Corinne that the numbers were worse than last quarter but nothing we cannot spin. Camille said, in French, that he should have listened to her about the Newport property. I know, Gregory said, in French. But we have Corinne now. Corinne looked at Simone briefly. Then back at Gregory. Her hand on the stem of her wine glass did not move. Simone excused herself between courses. She walked to the kitchen. She stood at the counter in the dark for a moment. She could hear the low murmur of the dining room through the wall. She heard Camille laugh. She heard Gregory say something in French about how Simone had gained weight since the wedding. She heard Corinne say, in French, that Simone was probably in the kitchen because she was more comfortable there than at the table. Camille laughed at that. Gregory did not laugh. Gregory said, in French, that this was not a nice thing to say. But he said it the way a man says a mild thing to keep the peace. He said it the way a man says a thing when he does not actually disagree. Simone leaned on the counter for a moment. She pressed her palms flat against the marble. She closed her eyes. She poured herself a glass of water from the tap. She drank half of it. She set the glass down. She thought about her grandmother Odette. She thought about the small kitchen in Baton Rouge with the yellow wallpaper and the copper pots. She thought about Odette teaching her how to say the words for salt and pepper and love and forgiveness. She thought about Odette saying, in French, never let anyone talk about you in front of you and think they got away with it, ma petite. Let them think it. Then remember. Simone had remembered. For 8 years, she had remembered. She walked back to the dining room. Dessert was a lemon tart. Simone served it with a small pitcher of cream she had whipped by hand that afternoon. She placed a slice in front of each guest, moving around the table clockwise, starting with Madame Delacroix and ending with Gregory. When she set his plate down, Gregory said thank you without looking up. Madame Delacroix asked her, in careful English, whether she had made the tart herself. Simone said yes. Madame Delacroix said that she thought the crust was very good. Simone thanked her. Camille said, in French, to Gregory, that even a monkey could make a lemon tart if the recipe was written down. Madame Delacroix stood up very quietly and walked to the powder room. Her husband looked at her back as she walked away. He looked at Gregory. He looked at Simone. He said nothing. Simone poured him more wine. The Delacroix stayed until 9:40. Corinne stayed until 10. The board members stayed until 10:30. When Camille finally kissed her brother on the cheek at the door, she said to him, in French, that he should think seriously about what he was going to do. Gregory said, in French, that he was already thinking. Simone stood in the doorway with her hands folded in front of her. She said goodnight in English. She closed the door. She turned off the porch light. She walked back through the house alone. She rinsed the wine glasses in the kitchen sink. She wiped the counter. She blew out the candles. 6 months earlier, she had sat in the same dining room and heard Camille tell Gregory, in French, that Simone was convenient and nothing more. She had heard, in that same conversation, Gregory reply that he was not a fool and that everything was already in motion. Simone had not known then what he had meant. She was beginning to now. She walked upstairs. She washed her face. She lay down beside her husband, who was already half asleep. She stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow she would call Renee. Tomorrow she would begin. She left the house at 6:30. Gregory was still in bed. She dressed quietly in the walk-in closet, put on a navy suit and low black pumps, and drove herself to the Bridgestone Hotel management offices in the Back Bay. She stopped at the coffee shop on the ground floor of her building and ordered a large black coffee. The girl at the counter knew her by name. She was at her desk by 7:15. She closed her office door. She opened a fresh legal pad and a blue pen. She wrote the date at the top of the page. Then she wrote, one line at a time, every French sentence she remembered from the dinner. She wrote them in French. She wrote English translations beside them. She wrote the name of the speaker and the approximate time. She filled 4 pages. At the top of the last page she wrote one sentence and underlined it twice. Gregory said everything is already in motion, 6 months ago. Confirm the meaning. She capped the pen. She sat for a moment with her hands flat on the desk. Then she picked up her phone and called Renee. Renee answered on the second ring. Talk to me, Renee said. I need a full review, Simone said. Prenup. Personal finances. My employment contract. Ownership of the LLC I used for the Whitaker consulting work 8 years ago. Anything else you can think of that has my signature on it. There was a pause. When? Renee said. Now. All right, Renee said. Are you okay? I will be, Simone said. Not yet. Renee did not ask questions on the phone. That was one of the things Simone loved about her. She said only, I will be at your office at 11. Do not sign anything before I get there. Do not have any conversations with Gregory about anything financial today. If he asks you a question that has to do with money, say you are late for a call and walk out of the room. Understood, Simone said. Simone, Renee said. Yes. I have been waiting for this call for 2 years. Simone did not say anything for a moment. I know, she said finally. While she waited for Renee, Simone stood at her office window and looked down at Boylston Street. The traffic below her was slow and orderly. A truck was unloading crates in front of a bakery. 2 women were walking dogs on the far sidewalk. It was, in every visible way, a normal Wednesday morning. She thought about what she was about to do. She thought about the vows she had said 8 years ago in a small chapel in Newport. She had meant them at the time. She had meant them for years after. She had held on to them longer than she should have because she had not wanted to be the kind of person who broke a promise. She had wanted, badly, for her marriage to be the one she had said it was going to be. It was not. She turned away from the window. She sat back down at her desk. She waited. Renee arrived at 11. She was wearing a charcoal suit and carrying a laptop bag and a large iced tea. Simone had cleared the small conference table by the window. Renee sat down. She did not open the laptop yet. She looked at Simone. Talk, Renee said. Simone talked. She started with the dinner. She did not tell Renee she had understood every word of the French. She told her only that she believed Gregory was moving assets, that she believed there was another woman involved, and that she believed the Whitaker Hotel's business was not as healthy as Gregory had been telling the family. Renee wrote all of this down. How long have you suspected? Renee said. 6 months. Why now? Simone thought about how to answer. Something was said last night, she said. I understood exactly what it meant. Renee looked at her. All right, she said. She did not press. They worked through lunch. Renee opened her laptop. She pulled up the prenuptial agreement from her firm's secure archive. She had drafted it herself, 8 years ago, as a favor. Simone had asked her back then to make sure the agreement was clean. Simone had also asked her, then, to insert one clause the Whitaker family lawyer had never questioned because it looked like standard boilerplate. That clause specified that any professional entity Simone owned before the marriage would remain her separate property throughout the marriage regardless of how much revenue it generated during the marriage. The Whitaker lawyer had signed off on it. He had assumed the entity was a small consulting operation Simone would wind down after the wedding. She had not wound it down. Prescott Operations LLC was still registered in Massachusetts. It had continued to invoice work throughout the marriage. It held 2 patents. It had a small but healthy operating account. It had been quietly running in the background of Simone's life for 8 years. Have you kept the LLC in good standing? Renee said. Every year. Filings, taxes, everything. Have you developed any of the software while employed at Bridgestone? No. Everything under Prescott Operations is on my own time, my own equipment, my own dime. Do you have documentation of that? Time-stamped code repositories going back 6 years. Personal server. Renee smiled. It was a small, professional smile. Simone, she said. You have been preparing for this without knowing you were preparing. I have known, Simone said. Renee looked at her over the laptop. How long? Since the wedding. Something in me knew. I did not name it. I kept the LLC because my grandmother told me never to close down a business I had built with my own hands. I kept the code current because the code was mine. I kept my professional network alive because the network was mine. I did not do any of it thinking, one day I will need to leave. I did it thinking, one day I might be glad I still had these things. That day is today, Renee said. That day started 6 months ago, Simone said. Today I am telling you about it. Renee looked at her again. How long? Since the day my grandmother died, Simone said. She told me before she went. She said, listen to what he says when he thinks you cannot hear him. She said, then you will know what to do. Renee did not say anything for a moment. I want to meet your grandmother, Renee said. You would have liked her, Simone said. She would have liked you. They worked until 4. By the end of the afternoon Renee had a full plan for the review. She would pull every filing, every invoice, every account statement Simone could remember, and she would build a complete map of what Simone owned separately, what was held jointly, and what belonged to Gregory alone. She would also begin, quietly, a review of Whitaker Hotel's publicly available financial disclosures. Do you want me to look into Gregory's schedule? Renee said. Not yet, Simone said. I want to know first what I have. I want to know what my ground is. Then I will decide what to do about him. Fair, Renee said. She closed her laptop. She stood up. Simone. Yes. When you decide, tell me. Do not go it alone. I will not, Simone said. She walked Renee to the elevator. She went back to her office. She sat at her desk. She opened the notebook again. She wrote one more line at the bottom of the page. Renee is in. Beginning today. She closed the notebook. She locked it in the drawer. She went home at 6. Gregory was in the kitchen making a sandwich when she walked in. He looked up. Hey, he said. You were up early. Big day at work, she said. Anything interesting? Just the usual. He nodded. He asked her if she wanted a sandwich. She said no, she was going to take a bath. She went upstairs. She ran the water hot. She sat on the edge of the tub while it filled. She looked at her hands. Her grandmother had been right. She had listened. She had remembered. Now she knew what to do. She got into the water. She leaned her head back. She thought about the sequence of things that had to happen in the right order. Renee first. The LLC review second. The prenup review third. The Whitaker Hotel's public filings fourth. Then the outreach to Harrison. Then the team. She listed the steps in her mind. She listed them again. She could see the shape of the plan now, the way an architect could see the finished building from the first stack of drawings. She stayed in the water for 30 minutes. She dried off. She put on a soft nightshirt. She went to bed. Gregory was already asleep beside her. She listened to his breathing for a while. Then she closed her eyes and slept. Odette Beaumont was born in a small house on Esplanade Avenue in New Orleans in 1938. She lived there until she was 22, when she married a Baton Rouge schoolteacher named Alonzo Prescott and moved north to raise their 3 children in a 2-story clapboard house with a wide porch and a live oak in the front yard. Simone had spent every summer of her childhood in that house. She had spent every Christmas there too, and every Easter, and every long weekend her mother could arrange. Her mother Gloria was a middle school principal in Baton Rouge, and Odette had lived only 15 minutes away. Odette had spoken French every day of her life. She spoke Louisiana Creole French, which was not the French of Paris, but it was a full and living language, and she spoke it with the affection of someone who had learned it from her own grandmother and refused to let it die. When Simone was 4, Odette had sat her down at the kitchen table and said, "I am going to teach you how to talk to me the way my grandmother talked to me. And when you have your own babies, you are going to teach them too. This is how we keep each other." Simone had learned. She had learned quickly, the way children do, and by the time she was 7 she could hold whole conversations with her grandmother in French. Odette taught her the words for cooking, for weather, for prayer, for anger, for love. She taught her the songs her mother had sung in a house on Esplanade Avenue in the 1940s. She taught her how to write it down, too, when Simone was old enough to sit still with a pencil. Simone competed in state French competitions in high school. She placed second her junior year and first her senior year. She spent her junior year of college in Lyon, France, where the standard French was different from her grandmother's Creole, but not so different that she could not adjust. She came back to Howard University for her senior year and finished her minor in French with a 4.0. She had done all of this because her grandmother had asked her to. Odette had come to Boston once, in 2013, to meet Gregory. Simone had been dating him for 6 months. Odette had been 75 years old and had refused to fly, so Simone had driven her from Baton Rouge to Boston over 4 days, stopping at motels along the way. They had eaten pancakes at a Waffle House in Tennessee and taken photos at a scenic overlook in Virginia. They had arrived in Boston on a Friday afternoon. Gregory had been polite. He had taken them to a very expensive restaurant in the North End. He had ordered a bottle of wine that Odette did not touch because she was a Baptist. He had asked Odette what she did for a living. Odette had told him she had been a schoolteacher for 37 years. Gregory had said, "Oh, that's nice." He had said it the way people said, "That's nice," when they meant, "I have nothing to say to that." Odette had noticed. She had not said anything then. On the drive back to Baton Rouge, she had said only one thing about Gregory. She had said it in French, sitting in the passenger seat with her hands folded in her lap and her eyes on the road. She had said, "He does not think we are equal to him, ma petite. Not you. Not me. Not any of us. He will not tell you this in words. He will show you in the small things. Watch the small things." Simone had gripped the steering wheel. She had said, in French, "Should I not marry him?" Odette had thought about this for a long time. She had said, "Finally, you are grown. You will do what you decide. But if you decide to marry him, listen to what he says when he thinks you cannot hear him. Never tell him you speak French. Not ever. Let him think you cannot. And then, one day, when you know what he really thinks of you, you will know what to do." Simone had married Gregory 2 years later. She had not told him she spoke French. He had never asked. For the first 3 years of the marriage, Simone had almost forgotten her grandmother's warning. Gregory had been kind. He had come with her to Baton Rouge for Odette's 80th birthday. He had taken photos with the family. He had smiled through the whole thing. Odette had died in her sleep in the summer of 2019. Simone had been there. She had been sitting in the chair beside the bed reading a book when Odette had woken up briefly, looked at her, and said, in French, "Remember what I told you." Then she had closed her eyes and gone. Simone had held her grandmother's hand for a long time after. She had said, in French, I will. The first French insult she caught from Camille had come 3 months after her grandmother's funeral. It had come at a Sunday brunch at Gregory's mother's house in Providence. Camille had leaned toward her mother and said, in French, that Simone's dress was the kind of thing you buy at the mall. Simone had smiled through the brunch. She had smiled through the drive home. She had gone into her home office and sat down at the desk and put her face in her hands. She had thought about her grandmother. She had thought about how, without meaning to, she had proven Odette right within 3 months. She had opened a small notebook that night. She had written down the sentence in French. She had written the date. She had written the location. She had written who else was in the room. That had been the first entry. There had been many more since. She thought about the year she had first met Gregory. She had been 25. She had been in Boston for a hospitality operations consulting project, a short engagement for a small hotel group her firm had taken on. She had walked into a restaurant on the public garden for a Sunday brunch with a work colleague. Gregory had been at the next table with 2 friends. He had asked her, halfway through her eggs, whether she believed in fate. She had said no. He had laughed. He had said that was the wrong answer. She had liked that he had laughed. She had liked that he had not been offended. She had given him her number when he asked. He had taken her to dinner the next Friday. He had taken her to a play the following weekend. He had told her, 3 months in, that he had never met anyone like her. She had thought at the time that he meant it. She thought now that he had meant something more specific. He had meant he had never met a black woman like her from Louisiana who worked in his industry and knew what she was doing. That was not the same thing as never having met anyone like her. He had believed she was a curiosity. He had told her she was a discovery. He had married a curiosity. He had never gotten past it. She had understood this now, in a way she had not understood it before. She sat at her desk at Bridgestone and looked at the notebook. Odette had been right about the small things. Now, 5 years later, sitting at her desk at Bridgestone the day after the dinner party, she opened a fresh notebook and began writing the entries for the last 6 months. She wrote for 2 hours. She filled 30 pages. When she was done, she took the notebook home and put it in a locked drawer in her home office. She thought about her grandmother. She said, quietly, in French, I know what to do now. She closed the drawer. She went downstairs to make dinner for her husband. The system was simple. After every dinner, every family gathering, every business function where Gregory and Camille were present, Simone would come home, go upstairs to her office, close the door, and write down what she had heard. She wrote each entry in 3 parts. First, the French, exactly as she had heard it. Second, an English translation. Third, notes on the context, who else had been present, what the topic was, what she believed the sentence had meant. She kept the notebook at Bridgestone during the day. She brought it home at night. She kept it in a locked drawer with a key she wore on a chain under her blouse. The first month yielded 22 entries. The second yielded 28. By the 4th month she had filled a full notebook and started a second. The entries fell into 3 categories. Category 1 was personal cruelty. Camille and Gregory talked about Simone's appearance, her family, her taste, her manners, the way she laughed, the way she pronounced certain words in English. They talked about her behind her back at every family event. Category 2 was business. Gregory talked to Camille about Whitaker Hotel's problems. He mentioned a Newport property that was losing money. He mentioned a general manager in Charleston who was underperforming. He mentioned 2 board members who were asking too many questions. He mentioned that a consultant named Corinne was giving him a new perspective. Category 3 was Corinne herself. Simone had counted 47 references to Corinne in 4 months. Most were casual. Corinne was helping with a rebrand. Corinne had ideas about the Newport property. Corinne had recommended a new PR firm. But there were also references that had nothing to do with business. Gregory had told Camille, in French, that Corinne was staying at the Copley Plaza on a Tuesday night. He had told her Corinne was flying to Boston for the weekend. He had told her, at one dinner in February, that he did not know how to keep going with the current arrangement much longer. Camille had said, in French, "You do not have to keep going. You just have to plan." Simone had written that entry down word for word. She had underlined it. She had written in the margin, "They are planning something. Watch for signs." In her professional life, she performed her role at Bridgestone with her usual precision. She led 2 acquisitions of small boutique hotels in the Northeast. She wrote a white paper on operations efficiency in mid-market hospitality that circulated within the industry and generated 3 job offers she politely declined. She built strong relationships with the ownership groups her firm managed. She traveled to conferences. She did all of this while also, quietly, taking notes. In her personal life she continued to attend Whitaker family functions. Sunday brunches in Providence. Cocktail parties in Boston. A weekend in Nantucket in March, where she sat on the porch of Gregory's family beach house and listened, over 3 days, to more French than she had heard in a single stretch in 8 years. The Nantucket weekend produced 14 entries. Camille had said, on the second night, in French, that she did not understand why Gregory had waited so long. She had said, "If it were me, I would have been out 3 years ago." Gregory had said, in French, "I know. But there are things she does not know about the company. I do not want a fight about the company. I want a clean exit." Camille had said, "Then get one." Gregory had said, "I am working on it." Simone had listened to all of this while pretending to read a book. She had gone upstairs afterward and stood in the bathroom with the door locked for 10 minutes. Then she had come out and gone to bed. The next morning she had gotten up at 5 and taken a long walk on the beach. She had watched the sun come up over the water. She had thought about her options. She had come back to the house at 7 and made coffee. Gregory had come down at 8 and asked her how she had slept. "Fine," she had said. The ocean was loud. "You should have closed the window." "You are right," she had said. She had smiled. She had brought him his coffee. The next Monday, back in Boston, she had opened a new tab in her office and looked up Corinne Fontaine. Corinne was 30 years old. She had a small consulting firm registered in New York. Her client list included 3 boutique hotel groups on the East Coast, one of which was Whitaker Hotels. She had gone to school in Providence and then to Georgetown. She was originally from Marblehead. She spoke French and English and, according to one interview Simone found from 2 years ago, considered herself a bridge between old money and new hospitality. Simone read the interview twice. She closed the tab. She opened a spreadsheet and began mapping Corinne's known Whitaker Hotels engagement dates against Gregory's calendar over the last 18 months. She had access to Gregory's calendar through the family Google account, which they had never delinked. The overlap was almost total. Every time Corinne was in Boston for a consulting engagement, Gregory had an off-site meeting or a dinner with an investor or, on 3 occasions, a late night at the office. Every time Corinne was in New York, Gregory happened to be there for a conference or a client visit. Simone printed the spreadsheet. She put it in a folder. She put the folder in the locked drawer. She closed the drawer. She looked out the window at the Charles River. She was ready to move. That evening she went home. Gregory was there. He had ordered Thai food. He asked her about her day. She told him about a small contract renewal she had closed that morning. She asked him about his day. He told her about a Newport property meeting that had gone well. She knew the Newport meeting had not gone well. She had seen the internal Whitaker Hotels performance report earlier that afternoon on a public disclosure site. The Newport property had missed its occupancy target for the 4th consecutive quarter. She smiled at him and said that was good to hear. He took a bite of pad thai. He said, casually, that he had been thinking about a trip to Nice in the fall. Just the two of them, he said. Get away for a while. She looked at him for a moment. She had a sudden clear image of what a trip to Nice with Gregory in October would actually be. Him gone during the day for meetings. Her in the hotel room. Him coming back at 9 at night. The two of them at dinner. Him and Camille on a video call afterward. Her lying awake. She said that sounded nice. She said maybe October. She said she would look at her work calendar. He nodded. He kept eating. She got up to clear her plate. In the kitchen, alone, she quietly said, in French, to no one, that she would never board a plane with him again. Then she rinsed her plate and put it in the dishwasher. The National Hospitality Executives Conference was held every March at the Grand Central Hyatt in New York. Simone had attended every year for 6 years. This year she was giving a talk on Tuesday afternoon about operations efficiency in mid-market properties, the same paper she had written the previous fall. Her firm had been asked to sponsor a coffee break. She had been asked to sit on a panel about the future of boutique hospitality. She had also, quietly, arranged 4 private meetings over the 4 days of the conference. 2 were with hotel ownership groups she planned to approach later as Meridian clients. 1 was with a young operations manager she wanted to eventually recruit. 1 was with a small hospitality technology firm whose scheduling software might complement her own patents. She did not tell Gregory about any of these meetings. She kept her conference schedule on a personal calendar he could not see. Gregory had asked her the week before the conference whether she wanted him to come along. She had said she would be busy the entire time and that he should stay in Boston and handle his own work. He had nodded and said, "You are probably right." He had booked a suite at the Grand Central Hyatt anyway. She had noticed the booking on the shared credit card statement the night before she flew out. She had not said anything. She had checked into the conference on Monday afternoon in her own room 3 floors below Gregory's suite. She had not told him she was in the same hotel. She had assumed he was not planning to run into her. She had been right. On Monday evening she had given her opening panel. On Tuesday afternoon she had given her talk. Both had gone well. On Tuesday night she had gone to a dinner with 3 hotel ownership groups her firm was courting. On Wednesday evening, the last night of the conference, she came back to the hotel at around 9. She was tired. She had wanted to change into slippers and order room service and go to bed. She had walked into the lobby. She had seen them at the bar. Gregory was sitting on a low leather couch by the fireplace, in a navy sweater and jeans. Corinne was sitting next to him. She was in a green dress, a different green from the one she had worn to Simone's dinner party 6 weeks before. She had her legs crossed toward Gregory. Gregory had his arm along the back of the couch behind her shoulders. They were speaking French. Simone stopped inside the lobby entrance. She stepped to one side, behind a tall potted plant, and she watched. She could not hear them clearly from where she was standing. But she could see them. She could see the way Gregory's fingers rested on the back of Corinne's neck. She could see the way Corinne laughed at something he said and leaned her head against his shoulder for a moment. She could see the way he brushed her hair back with his hand. She watched for about 90 seconds. She did not photograph them. She did not approach. She did not make any sound. She turned around. She walked out of the lobby. She took a cab from the front of the hotel and rode around the block twice and then came back in a different door. She rode the elevator up to her floor. She let herself into her room. She sat on the edge of the bed with her hands in her lap. She was not crying. She was thinking. She thought about 8 years of dinners. 8 years of Sunday brunches. 8 years of family holidays where Camille had said, in French, that Gregory had married beneath himself. 8 years of Corinne, or someone like Corinne, waiting in the background. 8 years of her grandmother's voice in her head saying, "Listen to what he says when he thinks you cannot hear him." She had listened. She knew. She thought about the anger she had expected to feel and did not feel. Grief, maybe. A little of it. But not anger. Not the kind of anger that ruins a plan. She was, she realized, done with him in a way that surprised her by its completeness. She had used all her feelings about him up over the last 6 months. There was nothing left to burn. She could get to work now. She thought about Corinne. She did not know Corinne. She had shaken her hand once. She had watched her at a dinner table. She did not know what Corinne had been told about the marriage. She did not know what Gregory had said. She did not need to know. Corinne was not the point. Corinne would fade. The women like Corinne always did when the money went. Simone did not need to do anything about Corinne. She only needed to do everything about Gregory. She would never speak to Corinne. She would never write to her. She would never look for her again after tonight. She had decided this a long time ago in principle. Now she decided it in fact. She sat there for maybe 20 minutes. Then she stood up. She walked over to the small desk by the window. She opened her laptop. She wrote one email. To Renee Holloway. Subject, full package. Body, confirmed tonight. I need the full package by end of month. Divorce filing, LLC protection, asset review, everything. Let us start on Monday. She sent it. She closed the laptop. She ordered a plate of pasta from room service and ate it slowly in front of the muted television. She washed her face. She got into bed. She slept for 6 hours. At 6 in the morning she woke up. She lay in bed for 10 minutes with her eyes open. Then she got up. She took a long shower. She dressed in a dark green suit with a cream blouse. She packed her suitcase. She checked out of the hotel at 7:15. She did not go through the main lobby. She used the side entrance. She took the 8:15 shuttle to LaGuardia and the 10 o'clock flight back to Boston. She was at her desk at Bridgestone by noon. Renee had already replied. To Simone Whitaker. Subject, full package. Body, Monday, 9 a.m., my office. I have already started. See you then. Simone printed the email. She put it in the folder with the calendar overlay. She closed the folder. She opened her personal Gmail. She scrolled through her contacts and found a name she had been thinking about for 6 months. Harrison Whitfield. Carver Ridge Capital. She read his last email to her, from 26 months ago. He had said, in the last paragraph, if you ever decide you want to build something of your own, I want to be the first call you make. She had said, at the time, that she was flattered but that she was very happy where she was. She was not happy where she was anymore. She began typing. She wrote a short email. 3 paragraphs. She said she had been thinking about his offer. She said she had an idea she wanted to walk him through. She said she thought the timing was right. She read the email twice. She sent it. Then she leaned back in her chair and looked out the window at the Charles River. Somewhere below her, a small ferry was crossing toward Cambridge. Her phone buzzed on the desk. Harrison had replied. He had said, in one sentence, I have been waiting for this email for 2 years. Tell me when to be in Boston. Simone smiled. It was a very small smile. She wrote back, next Tuesday, 10 a.m., the Boston Harbor Hotel, private dining room. He confirmed within 4 minutes. She closed her email. She turned back to her work. Harrison Whitfield arrived at the Boston Harbor Hotel on Tuesday morning at 10 minutes to 10. He wore a gray suit and no tie. He shook Simone's hand with the same steady grip she remembered from the conference 2 years earlier. You look ready, he said. I am, she said. They sat at a small round table by the window. She had ordered coffee for both of them and a plate of pastries she did not intend to touch. Harrison had brought a leather folder with a single legal pad inside. He opened the folder. He picked up his pen. Tell me, he said. Simone talked for 40 minutes without stopping. She walked him through the mid-market boutique hospitality segment. She explained why she believed the segment was growing at a rate the major players had not yet noticed. She explained why Whitaker Hotels, in particular, had been running the segment badly for 6 years. She explained where the profit was hiding. She explained how her operations software, developed under Prescott Operations LLC, could reduce per-property overhead by 20 to 30% while improving guest experience metrics. She did not mention Gregory by name once. She did not have to. Harrison listened without interrupting. He took notes. He asked 2 questions in the middle. Both were technical. She answered both. The first question was about how her operations software handled overnight shift transitions in properties with fewer than 40 rooms. She answered him with a specific example from a small hotel in Rhode Island she had consulted with 3 years earlier, walking him. How much do you need, he said. 18 million, she said. Seed round. I want to launch in 6 months. I want 3 properties under management by month 12. Which properties? She named 3. 2 were current Whitaker Hotels managed properties whose ownership groups had, over the last 2 years, told her in confidence that they were unhappy. The third was a new property in Providence that was still choosing its management company. Harrison thought for a moment. You will need the operations team ready to move on day 1. That means you need to recruit before you launch. That means quiet. I know. You have already started. I have 2 commitments in principle. I need 3 more. Names? She wrote them down on a napkin and slid it across the table. Harrison read the names. He nodded twice. Good people, he said. They are. What are you calling the company? Meridian Hospitality Group. He said the name aloud once, then again. I like it. It sounds like something that has been around already. That is the point. He smiled. It was a small, professional smile. All right, he said. Here is what I will do. I will commit 18 million as seed capital, subject to standard due diligence on your patents and your LLC. I will chair the board through the Series A. I will pull in 2 other partners at Carver Ridge who I know will follow me on this. I will not, under any circumstances, discuss this outside of the room with anyone who is not on your list of trusted people. I assume Gregory Whitaker is not on that list. He is not. All right. He picked up his pen again. He wrote 3 lines on his legal pad. He turned the pad toward her. It said, Meridian Hospitality Group. Seed $18 million, Carver Ridge. Launch Q3. He signed his name underneath. That is not binding, he said. It is a promise. My lawyer will send a term sheet by the end of the week. But I do not go back on things I sign. Simone looked at the piece of paper for a moment. Then she looked at him. Thank you, she said. I have been waiting for this, Harrison said. The last time we sat down together at that conference I told my wife on the phone that night that I had just met the smartest operations executive I had ever spoken with. She asked me who. I said Simone Whitaker. She said, why is she at Bridgestone? I said, because she is playing a long game. I did not know how long. Simone looked out the window at the harbor. Neither did I, she said. Harrison sat back in his chair. He looked at her for a moment. May I say one thing, he said. Yes. I have been in this industry for 30 years. I have seen a lot of husbands underestimate their wives. I have seen very few wives handle it the way you are handling it. Most of them lose their footing somewhere between finding out and moving. I have been watching your face this whole conversation. You have not lost your footing. I do not know how you have done that. Simone thought for a moment. My grandmother, she said. She told me once that if you know the door you are going to walk out of, you can stay in the room a long time. Harrison smiled. It was a slower smile than the first one. That is a good grandmother, he said. She was. They finished their coffee. Harrison signed for the table. He walked her out to the lobby. On the way he asked her one question. Why now? Simone thought about how to answer. Because I have all the information I need, she said. And I do not need any more. He looked at her. He nodded. I will not ask more than that. They shook hands. She watched him get into his car. She watched the car pull away. She walked back to her office. She spent the rest of the day working on the outline for Meridian's operations manual. She filled 15 pages. She wrote it in her own handwriting on legal pads. She did not put anything into the Bridgestone computers. She used her personal laptop, which she had brought in her bag. At the end of the day she took the laptop home. She put it in the locked drawer beside the notebook. Gregory was late that night. He came in at 9. He said he had been at a long meeting with the Newport ownership group. Simone did not check the calendar this time. She already knew. Any progress, she said. Some. Good, she said. She served him the dinner she had made. She sat across from him at the table. She asked him how his day had been. She listened to his answer. She smiled at the right moments. When they went to bed she lay on her side facing the window. She thought about Harrison. She thought about Bennett. She thought about Adrian. She thought about the 3 operations managers on the napkin. She thought about her grandmother. She said, quietly, in French, under her breath, it is starting. Gregory did not hear her. He was already asleep. Simone called Bennett Cross on Wednesday morning from her personal cell phone. Bennett had been Senior Vice President of Operations at Whitaker Hotels for 12 years. He had worked under Gregory's father before Gregory took over. He had watched Gregory make 3 significant operational mistakes over the last 4 years that had cost the company real money. Bennett was 52 years old, with a wife and 2 teenage children in a suburb west of Boston. He had a pension he cared about and a job he had grown tired of. Simone had known Bennett for 6 years. They had served together on a hospitality committee for the state's tourism board. They had once done a small consulting project together for a Rhode Island resort that was in receivership. They respected each other. She said, when he picked up, Bennett, this is Simone. I want to have a conversation with you that stays between us. If you are not able to have that conversation, tell me now and we will pretend I never called. Bennett was quiet for a moment. I can have it, he said. They met at a small cafe in Newton on Friday morning at 7. Simone had chosen a place neither of them frequented. She arrived first. Bennett arrived at 7:02. She told him, in as few words as she could, what she was building. Bennett listened without moving. When she finished, he said, how much of your compensation are you willing to put in writing before I resign? She named a number. It was 15% above what he was making at Whitaker Hotels. She also offered him equity in Meridian at a level Whitaker Hotels had never offered him. Bennett said, I need to talk to my wife. I need to think about the pension exposure. Give me until Monday. Take until Monday. He called her on Monday morning at 8:15. He said, I am in. Simone said, thank you, Bennett. He said, thank me when we have finished the first year. She called Adrian Wells on Tuesday from a coffee shop near her office. Adrian was 36. She had been marketing director at Whitaker Hotels for 4 years. She reported to Camille. She had been trying to leave for 2 years. Camille had blocked her every time she had been offered a role elsewhere, using industry relationships to sabotage the offers. Camille had done this because Adrian was more talented than she was and because Camille was afraid of losing her. Simone laid out the Meridian opportunity in a 20-minute phone call. She offered Adrian the vice president of marketing role with an equity package, full control of her own department, and a starting date 30 days after her resignation. Adrian said, before the 20 minutes was up, "Simone. Yes. I do not need to think about it." "You should think about it," Simone said. "You should call me back tomorrow so we both know you have thought." Adrian laughed. "All right. I will call you tomorrow." She called back on Wednesday morning at 9. "Nothing has changed," she said. "I am in." The 3 operations managers Simone had named on the napkin were harder. 2 came from firms that were competitors of Whitaker Hotels. 1 came from a boutique group in Providence that was closing down. Simone recruited all 3 over 4 weeks with a combination of equity, higher salary, and the specific promise that they would be building something rather than maintaining something. 2 of the 3 had known her from conferences. The 3rd had heard of her through Bennett. By the end of the 5th week, Meridian Hospitality Group had a leadership team of 5 people, plus Simone. None of them had told anyone at Whitaker Hotels what was happening. The discretion was carefully engineered. Simone had assigned each new hire a start date at Meridian that fell after their resignation from their current firm. She had asked each of them to use only personal email for all Meridian communications. She had asked each of them not to discuss the company with their spouses in specifics for the first 60 days. 2 of them had asked why. She had told them, honestly, that she was in the middle of a divorce and that early disclosure would create legal complications for her personally. Both of them had understood immediately. The 3 operations managers each drew up short transition plans at their current firms so that their departures would look routine. Bennett gave his notice to Gregory in person, in a meeting that lasted 8 minutes, in which he said only that he had decided to take an offer from another company and that he was grateful for 12 years at Whitaker Hotels. Gregory did not ask him where he was going. Bennett did not offer. Adrian gave her notice to Camille by email. Camille had replied with a 2-paragraph message that Adrian had forwarded to Simone. Camille had said that Adrian was making a mistake and that she hoped Adrian would not come crawling back in 6 months. Adrian had replied only, "Thank you for the opportunity." She had not said where she was going either. While she was recruiting, Simone was also filing patents. Prescott Operations LLC had been holding 2 software patents for 6 years. One was a proprietary operations management platform for boutique properties. The other was a guest experience analytics tool that had been developed in the 2nd year of Simone's marriage on personal equipment during evenings and weekends. Both had been filed under Simone's name individually. Both were separate property under the prenuptial agreement. Renee walked her through the language of both filings on a Saturday afternoon in Renee's home office in Cambridge. Renee's partner, Jacqueline, brought them tea. Jacqueline was an emergency room doctor who worked nights. She kissed the top of Renee's head and left them alone. "These are clean," Renee said. "Nothing in either of these filings ties back to your employment at Bridgestone or to any Whitaker asset. Gregory has no claim on either." "Good. You are also going to file a 3rd patent this month. The one you have been holding back. The scheduling algorithm." "Yes." Simone had developed the scheduling algorithm in the 6 months before the dinner party. It was the most advanced piece of code she had ever written. It could reduce staffing overhead in a 200-room property by up to 14% without any decrease in service quality. She had held it back. She had known she would need it. She filed the patent on a Tuesday. The next weekend was another Sunday brunch in Providence at Gregory's mother's house. Simone drove down with Gregory in his car. Camille was already there when they arrived. Gregory's mother, Helen, was in the kitchen. Corinne was not there. Corinne was never there when the family was gathered, which was one of the small confirmations Simone had catalogued. Camille embraced Simone at the door. She stepped back and looked at her. "You look tired again," Camille said in English. "Long week," Simone said. Camille said, in French, over Simone's shoulder to Gregory, "She looks tired every time I see her. Do you think it is the job?" Gregory said, in French, "I think it is the marriage." Both of them laughed. Simone smiled. She said, in English, "The traffic on the way down was rough. Do you need help in the kitchen, Helen?" She helped Helen with the salad. She listened to Camille and Gregory talk in French across the living room about the Whittaker Hotel's board meeting the following week. She learned 3 specific things during that conversation that Renee needed to know. She wrote them down in the car on the way home. Gregory did not notice. He was on the phone with someone from his office. That night, at her desk, she added the 3 new entries to the notebook. She looked at the notebook. It was almost full. She would need a third. She closed the drawer. Renee delivered the full legal memo on a Thursday afternoon. It was 43 pages. Simone read it in her office with the door closed. She read it twice. The prenuptial agreement she had signed 8 years earlier was as clean as Renee had promised her it was. Renee had drafted the version Simone signed after 2 rounds of edits from the Whittaker family lawyer. The Whittaker lawyer had inserted 3 clauses to protect Gregory. 2 of them were standard boilerplate about separate property inherited from family members. The third was a clause that specified that any professional entity owned by either spouse before the marriage would remain separate property throughout the marriage, along with any assets, intellectual property, or revenue generated by that entity during the marriage. The Whittaker lawyer had inserted that clause to protect Gregory's family trust and his ownership stake in Whittaker Hotels. He had never asked Simone whether she owned a professional entity of her own. He had assumed she did not. Simone had not corrected him. Prescott Operations LLC was covered. Everything Prescott Operations owned was covered. The 3 patents were covered. Meridian Hospitality Group, which Simone had incorporated as a wholly owned subsidiary of Prescott Operations, was covered. The $18 million from Carver Ridge Capital was flowing into Meridian, which meant it was flowing through Prescott Operations, which meant Gregory had no claim on any of it. Simone read that section of the memo 3 times. Renee had also mapped the marital assets. The house they lived in was owned jointly. The 2 cars were owned jointly. There were 2 joint checking accounts and 1 joint savings account. Simone's individual retirement account, which she had funded before the marriage, was separate. Gregory's stake in Whittaker Hotels was, under the prenup, his separate property, which he had confirmed in writing at the time of the marriage. That last clause was going to become the most important sentence in the whole memo. If Whittaker Hotels went bankrupt, Simone would have no exposure. If Whittaker Hotels was sold, Simone would have no share of the proceeds. Under the prenup, Gregory's ownership stake in Whittaker Hotels was his alone. Which meant that when Meridian Hospitality Group acquired Whittaker Hotels, Simone would not have any conflict of interest. She would not be buying an asset she was married to. She would be buying an asset that belonged entirely to her soon-to-be former husband. Renee had highlighted this section in yellow. She had written in the margin, "This is the door." Simone closed the memo. She sat for a long time looking at her desk. She called Renee. "I read it." "Good. How fast can we move on the divorce filing?" Renee said, "Once you decide, 1 week." "Not yet." "All right. I want the Meridian launch first. I want to be publicly a competitor before I file. I want him to feel the ground moving before he loses his footing." Renee thought about this. "Legally, we can do it that way. Personally, I want you out of that house. I am ready to move out. I have looked at an apartment in the seaport. Then get the apartment. Move in stages so it does not look like a move. Keep the notebook off the property from now on. I do not want anything of yours in that house that you cannot afford to lose. I already moved the notebook to my office. Good. Simone signed the lease on the Seaport apartment the following Monday. She began, over the next 3 weeks, moving her things out of the house in small quantities, 4 or 5 items at a time, on days when Gregory was traveling. She moved her grandmother's cookbook first. She moved her personal photograph albums second. She moved her business books third. By the end of 3 weeks, everything she cared about was in the apartment. She furnished the apartment slowly. She bought a good desk. She bought a comfortable chair. She hung a photograph of her grandmother in the hallway, framed in dark walnut. She bought a small kitchen table and 2 chairs. She did not buy a second bedroom set. She had no intention of having anyone else stay there for a long time. She called her mother from the apartment on the second Sunday. She told Gloria about the divorce. She told her about Meridian. She told her about the boardroom day that was coming. Gloria listened without interrupting. At the end, Gloria said, "Are you safe?" "Yes." "Are you eating?" "Yes." "Are you sleeping?" "Some." "I am flying up on Thursday." "You do not have to." "I know." Gloria arrived on Thursday afternoon. She stayed at the apartment for 4 days. She cooked twice. She did not once ask her daughter for details of the marriage. She did not once mention Gregory's name. She sat with Simone in the evenings and watched an old movie on television. She held her daughter's hand once, briefly, during a quiet scene. On the last morning, at the door, with her small suitcase beside her, Gloria kissed Simone on the forehead. She said, in French, "You did what your grandmother told you to do." "I know. I am proud of you." "I know, Mama." Gloria left. Simone closed the door. She went back to work. Meridian Hospitality Group's public launch took place on a Wednesday in July. The launch was announced through 3 industry publications. Harrison Whitfield's name appeared prominently in the press release. Simone's name appeared as CEO. Bennett Cross was named Chief Operating Officer. Adrian Wells was named Vice President of Marketing. 2 of the 3 operations managers were named as regional directors. The press release did not mention Whitaker Hotels. It did not have to. By Friday afternoon, the industry knew. 2 of Whitaker's largest owner clients called Meridian before the end of the following week. Both of them requested formal proposals for taking over management of their properties. Simone assigned Bennett to lead both conversations. He came back with 2 term sheets within 10 days. Gregory did not immediately know that Meridian was Simone. The press release did not use her last name in a way that connected her to him. She had made sure of that. She was CEO Simone Whitaker, which was accurate but which sat, in the press release, without context, in a way that a person skimming quickly would not tie to Gregory. Camille figured it out first. Camille figured it out on a Friday afternoon in early August, at her desk at Whitaker Hotel's headquarters. She had been reading an industry newsletter that mentioned Meridian's rapid client wins. She had clicked on the profile of the CEO. She had seen the photograph. She had known immediately. She had walked, without saying anything to her assistant, down the hallway to Gregory's office. She had closed the door. She had said, in French, so that anyone passing the door would not understand, "Your wife has started a company that is taking our clients." Gregory had looked up from his laptop. He had said, in French, "What are you talking about?" Camille had put her phone in front of him. Gregory had looked at the photograph. He had said one word. He had said, in French, a word that Simone had written down in her notebook 50 times over 8 years, always at moments when he had been talking about her behind her back. He had said, impossible. Whitaker Hotels lost 3 management contracts over the following 7 weeks. The first was the Providence property. The ownership group had never signed a formal contract with Whitaker. They were on a month-to-month arrangement Gregory had never bothered to formalize. They gave 45 days notice and moved to Meridian. The second was a resort in Newport that Whitaker had been managing for 6 years. The ownership group had a contract with a termination clause that Bennett read very carefully. Bennett found a performance metric Whitaker had missed for 3 consecutive quarters. He wrote a letter to the ownership group. The ownership group invoked the termination clause. They moved to Meridian. The third was a boutique hotel in Portland, Maine. The ownership group had been considering a change for a year. They chose Meridian over Whitaker on a competitive bid. 3 contracts represented approximately 18% of Whitaker Hotel's annual revenue. The company's cash flow began to strain within the first month. Gregory tried to move quickly. He hired a new consulting firm to replace Corinne Fontaine's, which he quietly ended. He held a company-wide meeting in which he told his staff that the company was in a period of adjustment, but that the fundamentals were strong. He asked Camille to develop a new marketing campaign. Camille told him, in French, in his office, that she had lost her best marketing person to Meridian, that everyone else in the department was already updating their resumes, and that no campaign was going to fix the problem. Gregory had said, in French, "I need to think." He had come home that night at 8:30. Simone had been packing the last of her things from the ground floor office. She had not been trying to hide it anymore. 2 boxes were sitting by the front door. Gregory had walked in and looked at the boxes. He had said, in English, "What is going on?" Simone had looked at him. "I am moving out," she said. "I am filing for divorce next week." He had stared at her. "Because of Meridian." "Because of everything," she said. "Meridian is one part." He had sat down on the couch. He had put his head in his hands. "How long have you been planning this?" "Long enough." He had looked up. "Why didn't you say something?" "I did not need to say anything," she said. "I only needed to listen. You said everything I needed to hear." He had blinked. "What are you talking about?" She had looked at him for a long moment. Then she had said, in English, "Never mind. It does not matter now." She had picked up one of the boxes and carried it to her car. She had come back for the second box. Gregory had still been sitting on the couch. "Simone," he had said. "Yes. Do not do this." "It is already done," she said. She had closed the door behind her. She had driven to her apartment in the seaport. She had called Renee from the car. "File it Monday," she had said. "Consider it filed." Renee filed the divorce papers on Monday morning. Gregory's family lawyer received them at 10:15. He called Gregory at 10:20. Gregory called Simone at 10:22. She did not pick up. He called 4 more times over the course of the morning. She did not pick up. She let all 4 calls go to voicemail. She listened to none of the voicemails. She forwarded them to Renee. Renee wrote back that afternoon. She said, in her characteristic short style, "Your husband is emotional. This is normal. I have handled worse. Do not speak to him. If he shows up at your apartment, do not open the door. Call me." He did not show up at her apartment. He tried to reach her through Camille the next day. Camille called her from a private number, which Simone knew was Camille's number, and left a message. The message said, in French, "Simone, this is Camille. You need to talk to my brother. This is not going to end well for you if you do not talk to him." Simone listened to the message twice. She saved it. She sent it to Renee. Renee said, "Perfect. I will use this in the divorce filing if I need to." The Whitaker Hotel's board called an emergency strategic review in the 3rd week of September. The board was 5 people. 2 were Whitaker family members. 2 were outside investors. 1 was Douglas Ford, an old friend of Gregory's grandfather who had been on the board since the founding. Douglas Ford called Simone on a Wednesday morning at 7:45. He said, "Simone. This is Doug Ford. Do you have a minute?" Simone said, "Yes." He said, "I know what is happening. I have been watching Gregory make bad decisions for 4 years. I did not know you were building Meridian. If I had known, I would have called you sooner. I wanted to ask you one question." "Ask." "If the Whitaker Hotel's board voted to pursue a strategic sale, would Meridian be interested in making an offer?" Simone thought for approximately 2 seconds. "Yes," she said. "I would want to acquire the intellectual property, the client relationships, and the staff who choose to stay. I would not want the leadership team." "Understood." "Doug." "Yes." "How is the vote going to go?" Douglas was quiet for a moment. 3-2, he said. "I am the third yes." "Thank you." "Thank you," he said. He ended the call. Simone sat at her desk for a moment. Then she called Harrison. She said, "It is time." Harrison said, "I will have the offer package ready in 72 hours. Meridian Hospitality Group's offer to acquire Whitaker Hotels was delivered on a Friday morning to the Whitaker Hotels board. The offer was cash and stock. The valuation was fair. The valuation was based on Whitaker's current position, not its position 6 months earlier. Gregory would receive a payout for his personal stake. Camille would not receive a role in the new organization. No Whitaker family member would remain on the board. The board scheduled a vote for the following Wednesday. The vote was 3-2 in favor. Douglas Ford called Simone that Wednesday afternoon at 4. He said, "The vote is done. Closing meeting is scheduled for a week from Thursday. You should be there." "I will be." "Gregory does not know you are the CEO of Meridian. He knows Meridian is trying to acquire the company. He does not know I am the CEO. He knows the CEO's name is Whitaker. He assumes it is a coincidence." Simone smiled. It was a small, tight smile. "All right," she said. She looked out the window of her apartment. The seaport was gray. It was starting to rain. She said, "See you Thursday." She ended the call. She sat in her chair for a moment. Then she stood up. She walked over to the coat closet. She opened it. She looked at the red suit she had bought 3 weeks earlier and had hung, still in its garment bag, at the back of the closet. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she closed the closet door. She went to make dinner. She woke up at 5:30. The rain had stopped in the night. The sky over the harbor was clear. She lay in bed for a few minutes and listened to the quiet of the apartment. Then she got up. She did her morning routine slowly. Coffee. 15 minutes of stretching on the rug in the living room. A hot shower. A slow breakfast at the counter, half a grapefruit and toast with butter. She read 3 pages of a novel she had been reading for weeks. She dressed at 8. The red suit fit her well. She had bought it at a small shop on Newbury Street the day after the Whitaker board voted. She had told the tailor she needed it perfect for a meeting on a Thursday. He had promised her. He had delivered. The jacket was structured at the shoulders and cinched at the waist. The trousers were straight, sharp, and slightly cropped. She wore a cream silk blouse underneath. She wore black low-heeled pumps. She wore her grandmother's small gold cross on a thin chain, tucked under the blouse against her skin. She pulled her hair back into a soft twist out with the front pinned up. She looked at herself in the mirror. She said, quietly, in French, "This is the day." Renee picked her up at 9:15. Renee had brought a dark green folder with the closing documents inside. She had brought coffee for both of them. She did not talk on the drive. Simone appreciated that. The Whitaker Hotel's boardroom was on the 17th floor of a building on Federal Street. Harrison Whitfield and two Carver Ridge partners were already in the lobby when Simone and Renee walked in. Harrison looked at Simone. He nodded once. "You look ready," he said. "I am," Simone said. They rode the elevator up together. Douglas Ford was waiting outside the boardroom. He shook Simone's hand. "Ready?" he said. "Yes." "He is going to be surprised." "I know." Douglas opened the boardroom door. Simone walked in. Gregory was already seated at the far end of the long conference table. Camille was seated to his right. Two other Whitaker family members were seated across from them. Two outside investors were seated at the near end. There were three lawyers along the wall, one of whom was Gregory's family lawyer, whose face Simone had known for 8 years. Gregory looked up when the door opened. He saw Douglas Ford first. He saw Harrison Whitfield second. He saw the two Carver Ridge partners third. Then he saw Simone. He did not move for a moment. Camille saw her at the same moment. Her mouth opened slightly. She closed it. She looked at Gregory. Gregory's family lawyer stood up. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said. "May I ask why you are here?" Simone walked around the near end of the table. She walked past Gregory and Camille. She reached the head of the table on the opposite end from Gregory. She stopped there. She set her folder on the table. She looked at the room. "Good morning," she said. "Thank you all for being here. I am Simone Whitaker, Chief Executive Officer of Meridian Hospitality Group. We are here to close the acquisition of Whitaker Hotels." The room was silent. Gregory looked at Camille. Camille looked at Gregory. Gregory's family lawyer looked at Simone. "Mrs. Whitaker," the lawyer said, "I was not aware." "I know," Simone said. "That is fine. Everything is in order. Let us proceed." She sat down at the head of the table. Renee sat to her right. Harrison sat to her left. Douglas Ford took his seat at the middle of the table. Renee opened the folder. She began walking the room through the terms. The terms were the same terms the board had voted to accept a week and a half earlier. Cash and stock. Fair valuation. Transition plan for staff. Retention of the two operations executives Meridian had identified as valuable. Departure package for Gregory. No role for Camille. Renee was precise. She did not look at Gregory once. She read the terms as if he were not in the room. Gregory did not speak for the first 20 minutes. At the 21st minute, he raised his hand. "Question," he said. Simone looked at him. "Yes. The CEO of the acquiring firm. I want to confirm. That is you." "Yes. You have been building this." "Yes." "For how long?" Simone looked at him for a long moment. "Long enough," she said. Camille said, quietly, in French, so that only Gregory could hear, that she did not believe this was happening. Gregory said, quietly, in French, that he did not either. Simone looked at Renee. Renee looked at her. Simone nodded slightly. They finished the terms. The signing packet was passed around the table. Each party signed in turn. When it came to Gregory, his lawyer put the papers in front of him. Gregory picked up the pen. He looked at Simone one more time. He signed the first page. Then the second. Then the third. When he was done, he set the pen down. He did not pick it up again. The closing was complete at 10:42. Simone stood up. She said, "Thank you all. The Meridian team will be in touch this afternoon with the transition schedule. Douglas, I appreciate your leadership through this process. Harrison, thank you for the partnership." She looked down the table. She looked at Gregory. She looked at Camille. She spoke, for the first time in her marriage, in French. She said, in the clean, even tone her grandmother Odette had taught her at a kitchen table in Baton Rouge 30 years earlier. For 8 years I have listened to you. I have understood every word. Thank you for teaching me what kind of man you are, Gregory. And what kind of woman you are, Camille. Have a good afternoon. The room went very still. Gregory's face did not move. His eyes did. Camille's hand went to her mouth. She stared at Simone. Simone did not look at either of them again. She picked up her folder. She turned toward the door. She walked out of the boardroom. Renee walked with her. Harrison caught up with them at the elevator. That was in French, he said. Yes. How much of it did they understand? All of it. Harrison laughed. It was a short, surprised laugh. Simone Whittaker, he said. You are the most patient person I have ever met. My grandmother taught me, she said. The elevator arrived. She stepped in. Renee stepped in beside her. Harrison stepped in beside Renee. The doors closed. Simone did not smile until the elevator started moving. Then she smiled. It was a small, real smile. It was for her grandmother. 6 weeks later, the Boston Hospitality Council held its annual awards dinner at the Copley Fairmont. Meridian Hospitality Group won Emerging Firm of the Year. Simone won Operator of the Year. She walked up to the stage in a royal blue dress. Her mother Gloria was in the front row. Renee was 3 seats away. Bennett and Adrian were at the Meridian table. Simone accepted the award. She looked out at the room. She said, I want to say 2 things tonight. She looked at her mother. She said, the first is thank you to my mother, who taught me that quiet is not the same as weak. And to my grandmother, who taught me the language I used the day I closed my first acquisition. She paused. She said, the second is a sentence in that language. She spoke, then, in French, to the room. Some of them understood. Most did not. She said, I am here because I listened. She held up the award. She walked off the stage. Her mother stood up in the front row and waited for her. Simone reached her. Gloria took her daughter's face in both hands. She said, in French, softly, Odette would be proud of you. I know, Simone said. She held her mother. She was done.